Cats that were adopted from here, we would have given you the microchip information, but if you have lost it, just ask us and we can look it up here for you.
Yeah, we can always rescan them, yeah.
And then you can contact the microchip company, like she said, you know.
Yeah,
I think you can still do that even if you didn't pay the annual membership.
yes, you can, because I moved like 5 times since I had my cat, and I forgot to update the address, and it still said he lived in Atlanta, Georgia, which is not true, so if somebody picked him up, they'd be like, what? So it's good to know how to access your microchip information so that you can update things like phone numbers, addresses, or in case of emergency contacts, things like that. Who's your regular veterinarian? They can call your veterinarian and say, hey, I have Benjamin Walkley here, he's a client of yours, can you call his people? You know, and so the more information you link to the chip, the better.
That would be an excellent thing to add to the many missives that we get, even just for staff and volunteers, you know, I mean, how many emails do we get every week? It would be wonderful for the thousands of us.
The emails about what?
Well, to know this linking stuff to the.
To microchip.
To the microchip,
Yes.
that it can be done, and how do you do it?
Yeah, yeah, so
I mean,
if,
that would be as a 13-year volunteer, I would much appreciate knowing,
Okay.
you know?
We can
Yeah.
talk to Megan
And-
about that. We can ask, you know, we
Yeah,
can do some
and that
research
would
on
be
it.
information that when, I mean, even if we could, then, you know, I see things on Nextdoor all the time about cats or animals that do or don't have microchips or this or that, and,
Sure.
you know. And I think the microchip overall information is under
yeah,
in the
Right.
importance of it and what all, you know, if a cat is epileptic or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an asthma cat,
yeah.
so if he were to get out.
He needs his
and be
inhaler.
found- He needs his inhaler, that's right. Exactly.
Well, that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that we can all say here, it's really disheartening when we have an animal that we have to euthanize that has their microchip, and that microchip's not registered. And so it's like, this is somebody's pet, but
Exactly,
they didn't quite finish the process, so we still don't know who they are.
yeah.
So when we, I'm sorry?
Very common, people move and don't have data.
Yeah, I'm guilty, yeah, totally.
Well, and especially young people, I mean, I haven't lived in 33 years, but, you know, young people, I moved a lot when I was young.
Sure,
You know,
yeah.
Every year or two, I was in a different apartment
Absolutely.
or condo or
Absolutely.
something, so.
Yeah.
Like 20 years ago, a lot of vets wouldn't give the FIV vaccine
Mm-hmm.
because it was a fear of injection site sarcoma. Is that?
Mm-hmm. As far as I know, that's, well, not necessarily just proven, but I think there's been some improvement to the vaccine, that we're no longer seeing that associated risk as high. Cats, unfortunately, we see a lot of injection site reactions with PFSR. I think that cats just have a very hyperactive immune response to injections. And so unfortunately, that's still a concern, but I wouldn't say it's any more of a concern right now with the FeLV vaccine than other vaccines. Which is why we are in foster. I know you guys are still able to vaccinate the scruff, right? Did I say-
Well, we moved it
To the shoulder? Okay, good, that's better, that's better.
unless we can't get any, can't
Yeah.
get tent.
Yeah, it's better to vaccinate than not vaccinate, but it's better to vaccinate on the leg if you can.
Yeah.
And that's because if you have an injection site sarcoma reaction, you can amputate a limb. You can't do that.
Isn't the incidence a small fraction of a percent?
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't, it used to happen, I think, a lot, but it's less and less common now. We see a lot of reactions that are abnormal, but they're benign reactions. It's just like a proliferative fibrous tissue rather than a neoplastic tumor. We do not vaccinate for either of these things here in the shelter. This positive ID for the FIV vaccine would be a concern of ours. Also, we move cats around colonies. We allow them to interact with each other. mutual grooming, we get cats off the street. So for us, the best way to manage and know the status of cats is to test them, rather than relying on the vaccines at this point. That may change, things are constantly evolving as far as preventative care and medicine, but right now that's the most effective way to manage these cats. And so after adoption would be the point to look into how am I going to house my cat, who is my cat exposed to, and would either of these be beneficial to my cat. So definitely to follow up with your regular vet on those after adoption. Okay, so and the reason why the FIV test is not discernible between vaccine or true infection is because these SNAP tests are awesome. They're they're very sensitive, so they're really good screening tests. But the FIV is looking for the antibody, and whereas the FeLV is looking for the antigen. And so what that means is, when your body is exposed to a pathogen, a bacteria or virus or parasite or otherwise, your immune system makes basically a poster to hang up on your 10 most wanted list. And they say, hey, this guy came in, he's bad news, so let's make sure that we meet him next time he comes and get him out. So that's kind of how your immune system works on identifying bugs. So when the virus comes in, it distributes what's called antigen throughout the body. And then our body kind of makes the counterpart, which is called antibody, and that way it binds to the antigen and it keeps it at bay until your body can get rid of it. It's kind of like a magnet, that somebody's assigned to look out for that bad guy, and then they get him out. So when we test for FIV, we're looking for our body's response to the presence of the virus. So when you vaccinate, it's the exact same process, only you're giving them a killed version of the virus, so that doesn't actually cause disease. But the response is the same, which is why vaccines are effective. They can build that response to the virus without being at risk of getting the virus. So when we test for it, we can say, okay, the antibody is present, but is it present because this cat was vaccinated, or is it present because they actually got infected with the disease? That's why we can't distinguish. On the other hand, at FeLV, we test for the actual presence of the virus. So when we get a positive test, we know that virus is in the system. So it's a little bit more definitive there that when they are positive, they are infected. And so with the FIV, that's why the vaccines can be problematic. We also have, this just kind of complicates things a little bit, but kind of like vaccination, when you are nursing off of the mom gives some of her antibodies to her kittens until they're able to produce their own, which happens at about 4 months or so. And so if you test a kitten for FIV and it's positive, but it's only like less than 6 months, I would retest that kitten because it may still have some of mom's circulating antibodies, and then you would be able to say, okay, now it's negative after 6 months, so that was probably from mom, but the cat overall is negative. So it's pretty complicated, but that's kind of where we run into trouble with managing these diseases, especially when we have so many cats in our care. Just for time's sake, I'm going to kind of skip through our SOPs and how we manage identifying positive tests, et cetera, in the shelter, because I think it's kind of more important that we spend some time on what to do once they're on the adoption floor, and that way you guys can kind of ask more questions about that, okay? So here at DFL, who do we test for retroviruses? Everyone. Everyone gets a test. I don't care, they get a test before they leave the building. We test everybody 4 months of age or older. We don't test under 4 months, we don't test under 6 weeks for either FeLV or FIV because they're just not old enough to have a true infected state. And then again, we don't test for FIV under 4 months because of the risk that mom's antibodies may be present. So cats that go up without being tested for FIV are not retested, but they should be if they're here for another 2 months. So we move cats along with FIV status. There's kind of criteria here if we have like a nursing mom and kitten and how we manage those. But again, we retest them at 6 months to make sure that they're truly negative. Right now, for our FeLV positive test, like I said, we're considering moving more of these cats along, which is great. There is a better test out there than the SNAP test, and that's an immunofluorescent assay test, and that we use to confirm a positive test. So here in the shelter right now, if we get a positive test, we basically redo it. And if it's still positive, then we send it out. So we have 3 tests to confirm a positive status. And then if that is still positive, then that's when we would consider maybe moving that cat along at this point, or when we would historically look for a rescue or mark for euthanasia. So again, that's kind of where we're currently at, is PP options or rescue options or euthanasia. And then this is Camilla's new flow chart, which, sorry Camilla, I stole from her computer. But basically, we are going through more steps to confirm the positive status. And we're gonna have various types of releases that say, this cat tested positive and then it tested negative. We think he's negative, but he could be at risk of spreading it. This cat is positive, he's still positive, we confirmed it's positive, it's positive. So you guys may encounter these in the future, but we will definitely kind of send out the updated SOP when we do make that official. And that's kind of, this is gonna be that kind of example of the SOP: contagious, associated with severe diseases, immune suppression, shortened lifespan. All of those are really scary, so there's a lot of filler here that makes it sound like it's not that bad. But those would be the types of things that if you're adopting out a cat with FELV in a very similar fashion as FIV, that we would want people to know. I got an example on Tuesday that's like somebody's adopting a cat, they just lost their cat to cancer, it was devastating. Probably wouldn't adopt out an FIV positive cat to that person unless they understood that he may have to go through that like sooner than if he adopted a happy, healthy kitten. So those are things to consider about this disease that are unfortunately very true. And do you have the funds? So
Are we currently putting FELV cats up for adoption?
we did a trial period. I think we had 2 that were up for adoption. They both got adopted, which is great. We don't get that many positive cats that are otherwise super healthy. So when we look at their FELV status as positive, but they also have ringworm, chronic URI, for some reason it's limping on this leg and we don't know why. Those would have that we would use their FELV positive status to say, okay, we think that this cat may be succumbing to this disease already, and that would likely be a euthanasia decision. This week, actually, we had like a 4-month-old kitten that was super healthy, like kind of chunky, but was FELV positive. So he's in the process of getting retested and retested. And so we're going to consider either sending him to foster or potentially putting him up as our next trial to see how the community responds. You know, I think that we all have different feelings on, would you adopt a cat that's FELV positive? You know, Karen in adoptions has had several, and she's very well aware of the disease and the likelihood to succumb to other diseases, and so she's willing to take that on, and that's great. But it's definitely not for everyone.
But then it's no different than adopting like a 13-year-old lab or.
Exactly.
Or a
Mhm.
15-year-old lab, so.
Yes, yeah, and that was the point raised at the last conversation too, is if we tell them to keep their cat inside, you know, how do we know they're gonna do that? Well, we don't know that, and unfortunately, it's one of the things that we ask of a lot of our adopters is to follow up and to take care of this pet. We're entrusting this dog to you now, you know, give it its meds for its arthritis. And so there's a point where we have to hope for the best. So in your experience, what hesitations do you hear when it comes to people interested in adopting FIV cats? We'll stick to FIV since that's what we have on the floor. Anything come to mind in particular?
That cost.
Cost?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then also, if they have other cats at home.
Okay. Okay.
Those are probably the 2 big.
Great. Yep. Those are, I think, really important ones. Yep.
Like a translated stigma from like HIV to FIV. 'Cause
Okay.
you hear like the ending, and
Yep.
like, oh God, I've heard of that with
Yep.
people, it's so awful. And
Yep.
kind of like bring that on to the cat.
Yep.
And project it that way.
Okay. That's a great point.
Or to take 2 up, 2.
Yeah. Can they take 2?
Well, my veterinarian, runs my vet office, which is Vita over
Yeah.
on here at University Hill.
Uh-huh.
they adopted two of our FIV cats that are back of the house. I mean, they're the cats that wander around in the back of the
That's funny.
clinic.
Yeah.
I think of the old Saturday Night Live skit with Debbie Downer, and she says, feline AIDS, number one cause of cat death. You hear the sad, wah, music, so.
Oh, no, I don't know that skit, but that's really sad. There is, I can totally understand why somebody would be really hesitant about that, especially if you call it feline AIDS because of the epidemic that we experience as people, and that we still have to deal with. But the unfortunate truth is they are very similar, and even in people who contract HIV, it is human immunodeficiency virus, and this is feline immunodeficiency virus. They are not contagious between species, so a person would not be at risk at contracting the disease if they adopt a cat. But they progress in a very similar manner, where the virus itself is not what causes a person to get sick, but it makes them more susceptible to other illnesses and less able to fight off other illnesses. Unfortunately, I think that with the epidemic of human AIDS that we experience here in the U.S., a lot of people were flooding the hospitals and picking up diseases in hospitals, and then unfortunately that's what caused them to die, is they were encountering another disease. And so understanding that these cats need support, and that subtle signs of illness are really more serious than if the cat didn't have FIV, I think would be an important point to bring to somebody's attention, but also the point of it's not necessarily a death sentence. This cat can have a really long, good quality of life. It just might need some extra attention. It might need a yearly visit from your vet or a yearly dental cleaning. They're usually really sweet old tomcats, that we find that are FIV positive, and so it would be a wonderful addition to your family. You just may not have them as long as your other cats, and you need to be a little bit more cautious when he gets sick and making sure you follow up with the veterinarian. And so I think that connotation, and while it's really heavy and unfortunately sad, it's true, and it is something to be kind of upfront about, but also to not deter them. They would be giving this cat a great life for as long as they have it. And I say him because it's most often a male.
If somebody wants to adopt an FIV positive cat and they have other cats, can we try to keep them from doing that, or do we actively?
I have,
Yeah.
pretty much, there's typically a recommendation on their thing, on their profile that we say, we do recommend that you don't have other cats in the home due to the fact that this cat could spread this to your cat. So,
Yeah, and I think that would be the gold standard response. I think it's hard to deny a cat a group home, because cats they can be such social creatures. Not all cats, obviously. I think at a point you could leave that up to the adopter and
I
say
think a
you
good
need
majority of our adopters are more concerned about the cat they have at home. And
Yes.
so it's something that they won't,
Yeah, okay. And that's good. I think that, in my very personal opinion, from both a cat lover and a veterinarian, I would just say to either follow up about vaccines with your healthy cat, slow introductions. If you introduce a male cat to another male cat, you're like, it's probably going to fight. So maybe that wouldn't be a good fit. If you have an old female cat at home, maybe they'll get along. With FIV, it's more contracted through bite wounds and mutual grooming. It's unlikely that they would spread the disease, but it's possible. So I think that person would have to make that decision for their current cat, know the retroviral status of their current cat, and protect their current cat while keeping them both as healthy as possible. So
You start adopting more FeLV cats.
yes,
Would we discourage that even more with other cats, because it's probably more contagious, right?
I probably would. I probably would say there's an increased risk compared to FIV that it would spread.
And everything you're saying about the slow introductions, everything, we say that to
I
any
know.
adoption, you
Yeah.
know, so.
And
so-
it sometimes happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but,
that they're still risking the chance of exposing
yes,
their cat with anything that this cat may have here, so yeah.
yeah.
That's something that we, express for
Yep.
any adoption, so.
Yeah, yeah, and the sooner upfront we can prevent the spread of the disease, the less, the less severe and the less prevalent it will be. And hopefully we'll figure out a way to keep FIV less prevalent, which is, it's interesting that it is still just as prevalent, as it was to start, but yeah, we have a responsibility to all the cats, including the FIV positive cat, to stop the spread of the disease. Since we know how to. And then I'm sorry, if they want to adopt 2 FIV positive cats, yes, I would say go for it. What was the other hesitations? Cost?
Veterinary costs, yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that, because we're already over time. What to do if you have other other cats in the house, minimizing the risk. And compliance. Do what we tell you, and it will go better. Imagine that. Indoor only, again, to protect your cat from the disease from another cat, but also protect this cat from that cat if it's positive. Keeping them indoor is recommended, not for all cats. Cars are our greatest predators, right? There is that documented association between dental disease and retroviruses. So routine veterinary care, including dental care.
Day.
I know, right?
They do brush their own.
I know.
exactly.
I know.
Yeah, so you gotta,
They do a good brush, go ahead.
Yeah, if you give them that photo, maybe they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah. This is a really rough estimate that I came up with just based on some estimates from clinics in the area. So when you take your cat to get an annual physical exam, you're looking at probably close to $100. You have vaccines and blood work every year. That can range based on, what level of blood work screening you do. And then say your cat is a young FIV male, adult male, who has healthy teeth right now, so you can get away with maybe in 2 years getting them cleaned, maybe yearly after that, depending on how, if he shows signs of dental disease, how frequently that is. A cleaning on average is $600, with extractions can be upwards of $1,200, $1,300. Full mouth extractions in particular, and that's just from your local veterinarian. If you want to go to a dentist, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, but that's, your local veterinarian is not a bank robber, they are just doing their job. But we have Solutions Veterinary Hospital, which is a really fantastic resource, and hopefully we'll have more and more resources like this that have set prices. I actually was asked, what if we do like a dental voucher for an FIV positive cat that says your dental will only be this much because we know he has FIV. It's a great idea. I don't want to set the impression that every FIV cat is going to need full mouth extractions at some point, but I think that if we come to that point where we get a lot of people doing prophylactic dental work, then we can work something out, because that would be great. So at SVH, it's around $300 to $400 with extractions. So it's still a lot, but it's significantly better. So I would set them up for, you're probably going to spend $1,000 for the first 2 years that you own this cat, and then be ready to do that again in the next few years. And I think that would be a really scary number to throw out at somebody, but I think it's accurate, so.
How much of this are we, in my case, some of our cases as volunteers, do we just say, call Joe, he can
Yeah.
tell
I
us.
love it, call me.
Call Doctor, how's your last name?
It's broccoli, like
Broccoli.
broccoli.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not comfortable, I'm very interested in this for my own purposes,
Sure.
but I'm not comfortable telling patrons long lists of information.
Okay, absolutely, yes, no, and I don't think that I would ask you to go through this level of detail with them.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'm not qualified.
I think it's good for you to have a foundation of this knowledge, so if somebody says, does that mean I have to take my cat to the vet every year? Yes, it does. Well, what does that look like? Yes, what does that look like? Well, on average, $80 to $100 a visit. Okay, you maybe don't go into all the detail, but you're getting the wheels spinning in their head that, okay, this is gonna be this cat needs to be medically managed, you know, it's not just when he's sick, but we need to have annual workups to make sure he's still well. That would be just an important piece of information that may or may not be receiving already. In healthcare, we get a lot of adoption counselors coming back asking like, well, they want to know how much it's going to cost if this dog needs another foreign body surgery, you know, and it's like, okay, I want to be able to tell you nothing. Maybe everything will be fine and he'll never eat another toy that requires surgery. But he could eat one on his way out of here that may cost you $5,000, you know? So I wouldn't tell that person, expect to spend $5,000 every time he eats a toy. But they should know that that's a possibility and they need to be ready for it. SVH, care credit, pet insurance, these are all viable options. So you could say, it's likely this cat will cost you an annual vet visit. If he gets sick, we recommend that you seek veterinary care and as soon as possible. So this cat having an insurance plan for your cat, looking into resources at SVH, that information I think is more valuable than giving them a number. So I think giving them a number is often really scary, but saying that I know a little bit about this disease, unfortunately, it's likely your cat is more at risk of getting sick, so we recommend annual vet visits and frequent veterinary care if they do get sick. And then saying something like, we even recommend, you know, more routine dentals. Again, guilty as charged. I've never cleaned my cat's teeth. I look at them constantly, but I've never gotten them clean. But it's something that you need to be willing and able to do. And if you are overwhelmed by specific questions that may then result in, just call us. I mean, I think we're all getting a little bit more used to doing DVM consults and stuff. And our technicians are pretty well versed in these things as well, so somebody should be able to come answer their questions. Does that make you feel better?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like now I'm actually more confused.
I mean, I try to err on the not giving enough information side rather than giving wrong information.
Of course,
Possibly
yeah.
giving
Okay.
wrong information.
Yep.
But, you know, we do need to let them know that this is, you know,
Mhm.
likely to be more expensive than a typical cat.
Yeah, yeah. And I think Joe had a really good point in
A
that.
cat that is currently healthy.
Correct, yeah.
That could end up with any, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I
think there's two
Severe
types of.
epileptic cat that didn't become severely epileptic till he was a year old, and that was a pretty expensive proposition for a few years.
Yes, my cat had cancer when he was a year
Oh
old.
my.
He only has 3 legs now, but I was like, what? But I think Joe brought up a good point in that we kind of have, you know, 2 types of adoptions. Like we have young healthy dogs and cats, and then we have cats that have a diagnosis, that may be arthritis, something that we ask them to manage. This dog had a foreign body surgery, and we think he might have pica, which is the tendency to eat things he's not supposed to. That is probably way more expensive than this, you know, because if that dog does require surgery and they don't have a pet insurance or, you know, something, then you're definitely looking at an expense. But FIV, I think it shouldn't be any scarier than a lot of those other chronic conditions, but it's a chronic disease that we have to set somebody up for success and tell them that this is something you're going to have to manage. And maybe it's just routine vet care every year, like vaccinations and an exam. Maybe it'll be more. And if they feel overwhelmed, well, we'll take it back, yeah.
Yeah, that's reality.
Yeah. And maybe it's just not the best fit, and that's okay too, because that's one of our extreme privileges here at DFL is that we have the resources to get them another cat and find the right home for FU. FIV and FeLV positive cats. I am like way over time, I'm so sorry. I really appreciate you guys coming, I hope you got a lot out of this
Yes,
talk.
thank you.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Good, good.
And I'll be
This,
anxious to hear Jim and Chris's
Yeah.
outcomes. Holy.
Yeah, we can do our case study. and-
yeah, let us know, if anybody
know.
pops positive, I'd be really interested.
Yeah.
This information will be put online for you guys to reference if you need it. Again, my
Okay.
email,
That's great.
this is my email. These are topics that people have asked me to do